This is too cold.
The fire element. For me, this could mean one of two things. It either contains some of the best powerhouses of the entire series, or some of the most bland and generic Skylanders out there. Although it's not my favorite element, most of the Skylanders featured are extremely fun to play as. And it does hold a very special place in my heart, as my first ever Skylander that I ever collected just so happens to come from a fire element. With that faithful trip from TK Maxx, I was not only introduced to Skylanders, but also video gaming as a whole. So to simultaneously celebrate my 3rd year on YouTube, and 10 years since I got into the Skylanders franchise, I will be looking at all the fire Skylanders I currently have in my collection. It's super coincidental as I was going to do fire anyway first, so there's that. For this video, I'm going through every single fire Skylander I have, from SSA all the way to Imaginators. And since I am now starting the series proper, I'll be including new initiatives for Elemental Retrospectives going forward. The Skylander doesn't have to be fully leveled up, but at the bare minimum they need to be fully upgraded. And if I have more than one version of a Skylander, then I must try out both upgrade paths. That way, I'm giving every Skylander that I have a proper fair chance. And as for the Skylanders I'm able to have access to 2 different upgrade paths on, I will also be giving a recommendation on which upgrade path would be superior for that Skylander. Traps, vehicles, and creation crystals will not be included in this video. And last but not least, this video is all my personal opinion. And without further ado, let's look at the first 4 fire Skylanders from Spyro's Adventure.
Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire.
Starting pretty strong here, we have Igniter, who I believe has the best design out of the original 4 fire Skylanders. But don't worry, Igniter's not just for show. I got Igniter and Double Trouble in a birthday party I had, and when me and one of my friends who attended the birthday party went back home, we both agreed that maybe it's a good idea to try these 2 Skylanders out. So I booted up Swap Force and went into the arena battle mode. I played as Igniter while my friend opted to play as Double Trouble, and right from the get-go, I fell in love with Igniter even more. Despite being at level 1, Igniter quickly decimated Double Trouble with his primary attack. Igniter gave me a strong first impression, and from there on, he only got better and better. His secondary attack is super fun to mess with. His flame form can inject from his body, and you are able to control it, so it allows you to chase down enemies that might be far away from you. It's also effective under the Soul of a Flame path, which is the upgrade path I chose for Igniter. It not only just increases his flame form's move speed and damage, but the flame form also triggers a massive explosion, which just makes the move a whole lot more destructive. The extra 3 fireballs that spawn out of his body is also incredibly helpful as well. As fun as his secondary move is, I do not recommend to use it in every single situation. His suit of armor becomes immobile and it cannot defend for itself, and enemies will take advantage and punish you for mindlessly using his secondary move at the wrong moments. But that's when his 2 other attacks come in. His primary attack is reliable for singling out vulnerable enemies, and his tertiary attack is satisfying to use. It doesn't take too long to charge and has pretty good range and damage. If this isn't an excellent way to finish off an enemy, then I don't know what is. Igniter featured in my 5 Skylanders I Want video 3 years ago, and he was certainly worth that wait. While I'm still yet to get a Series 2 variant to try out his other upgrade path, for the time being, Igniter is a very fun Skylander who is very well rounded in all of his attacks in any given situation.
Hey, mister! Your head's on fire!
No, I'm wearing a crown!
Sunburn!
Sunburn has been the laughingstock of the Skylanders community for being the only Spyro's Adventure character to never get a repose, and that sucks because I believe that Sunburn really could have benefited from one. Sunburn was the first SSA Fire Skylander I got, besides Eruptor, when I went to CEX and purchased him along with the rest of the Dragon Peaks Adventure Pack and GTA 4 for the Xbox. While the level itself is pretty fun despite the dull dragon flying sections, Sunburn himself is a tough cookie to play as. While this may be because I chose his Flame Lord path, which more so focuses on a secondary ability, I cannot find enjoyment in his primary attack. It's a boring and static fire breath move which locks onto one enemy, which gets the job done, sure, but has limited range and it feels like a chore to handle. His other 2 attacks fortunately are a lot more interesting, but they only slightly make up for his primary attack. I'm grateful his tertiary attack isn't taken up by a flying move, as most people can agree that it is a waste of an attack slot. It's replaced with a dash attack, which visually looks pretty stunning, and a soul gem improves it to end with an explosion. But its effectiveness is extremely limited. It's great if you quickly want to go from point A to point B, but as an attack, it's just fine. It's good for clearing out small enemies and baiting attacks, but it slightly struggles with more tougher enemies. Then we get to his secondary attack, his teleport move, which in theory should be his strongest asset, his most unique attribute, and it is, once you get the hang of its slow-paced nature. His Flame Lord path improves it, as it is a very effective way to deal with groups of enemies, especially with added flame streaks when you teleport. However, that said, a massive problem I have with it is that his teleport animations are disrupted if you try to pass through stage obstacles with this move, which is utterly ridiculous. It makes you wonder why this move is even classified as a teleportation move. Sunburn is a bit of a mediocre Skylander for me. He has interesting ideas, and he stands out from other Dragon Skylanders for both good and bad reasons, but of all the original Fire Skylanders, he just wouldn't be my first choice because of his moveset's sluggish pacing, and he generally would have benefited from a Series 2 or even an Eon's Elite if Activision didn't throw him out in the cold. Sorry Sunburn, but you're just not my cup of tea.
There is a fell voice on the air.
Now this is more my kind of Skylander. I found Flameslinger one time in a charity store called Father, and he's far from a disappointment. Oh, that was such an awful joke. Flameslinger is gonna be one of those Skylanders I'll talk in depth a bit today, since I have both series variants of him, and therefore I can talk about both his upgrade paths. Even before upgrades, Flameslinger's primary attack is quick and snappy, which really complements his fast-paced gameplay. Meanwhile, his secondary move has to be his most iconic. It's already great on its own if you just want to speed through a level, but it's also incredibly helpful in combat. His Flame Dash can leave a trail of fire. If you are in a predicament when enemies are overwhelming you, just simply press the secondary attack button. You will not only escape harm's way, but unlucky enemies will also be damaged by the fire trail. His tertiary attack allows him to shoot multiple arrows up into the air, which in theory should cover a large number of enemies, but personally I find it very hard to get good use out of. And it sort of bogs down Flameslinger's pacing a little bit, but not by a whole lot. Flameslinger's upgrade paths are pretty good, but one's definitely better than the other. Flameslinger's marksman path improves his primary attack, though really the only advantage I can see with it is that his arrows can now shoot 3 fire arrows at a time, which is pretty good for area coverage. Personally, I'm much more of a fan of this Pyromancer upgrade path. It turns him from a pretty good Skylander whose main advantage is speed, to an amazing one. He gets a neat charge-up attack which may take a bit to prepare, but once fired, it leaves a fire trail. This can deal damage to enemies that may be far away from you, and it allows you to get the jump on them, especially if you're dealing with a larger and tougher enemy like this Lava King right here. The Pyromaster path also improves my favorite ability in Flameslinger's kit. He can perform a flame dash around an enemy in a circle, and if an enemy is unlucky enough to be in the middle, they will be severely damaged. I remember when I watched Flameslinger's commercial when I was younger, that move in particular caught my interest, as it adds another element of strategy to his gameplay. There is never a dull moment in Flameslinger. If you want to simultaneously blaze through a level and efficiently dispose of enemies, then Flameslinger is your guy any day, any time. Before Raptor started his acting career as Behemoth from the latest Megamind sequel, something tells me that's not gonna last for long. Eruptor was one of the best known Fire Skylanders, and he was my 3rd or 4th Skylander I ever collected, as I got both him and Light Cord Robot at the same time. So for quite a while, the only Spyro's Adventure Fire Skylander I had was Eruptor, and that's why he holds a bit of a special place in my heart. Oh yeah, and I have like 3 other Eruptors, so that's cool I guess. For Series 2 Eruptor, I got in a triple pack featuring Series 2 Terrafin and Stealth Elf, the same figure my younger self thought was a great idea to paint gold. Then I got Excellent Weeruptor in Fedebr in Denmark, and for Volcanic Series 3 Eruptor came in a batch of Skylanders my cousin didn't want anymore. Clearly I must like Eruptor if I have 4 figures of him, and I'm ashamed to admit, but yes, I do really like Eruptor.
Thank God I don't have to talk about him in this video.
On the top path, the Magmantor path, Eruptor is an absolute unit on the battlefield. The lava blobs that he just so happens to lob can bounce once and travel a bit farther and deals a good amount of damage. His pool of lava can clear hordes of small enemies and deal just that extra nice chip damage to bigger enemies. The magma balls against Bella for his tertiary attack is only really good if there's an enemy right in front of you. I cannot stand how slowly they travel, and they're very ineffective in most situations. Even worse, the fireballs from the magma walkers spit out travel a lot faster and deal way more damage. The fact that I'm complimenting an enemy attack really shows how little thought or care went into Eruptor's tertiary attack, but at the very least his Waphouse make an attempt to make that move viable. We'll get to them when we'll get to them. Bad's tertiary attack aside, I do really enjoy Eruptor, and despite his simplicity, I do find him a very charming Skylander. However, I'm still yet to touch base on his Volcano upgrade path. But because younger me thought that lobbing lava balls was the best thing ever, almost all my Eruptors are set on the top path. Lightcore Eruptor, top path. Series 2 Eruptor, top path. Mini Eruptor, top half. Volcanic Eruptor. Oh, finally, I broke that streak. And was it worth it? No. The only thing that improves here is his secondary attack. Eruptor's secondary attack takes less time to charge up, and it deals more damage, and that's it. His lava blobs suffer as they have limited range now, and his tertiary attack is still atrocious. So I'm really glad that most of my Eruptors are set in the top half. Sure, it means that Eruptor takes longer to do his eruption attack, but honestly, I prefer it that way, as I feel a lot more rewarded when I time his secondary attack to my advantage. So if you don't have an Eruptor yet, I'd 100% set him on his top upgrade path. Despite this, I still love Eruptor, and he's one of my personal favorites. While Flameslinger and Igniter may be just fundamentally better, both can't hold a candle to the sheer unbridled nostalgic joy that I have for Eruptor. He may not be perfect, but Eruptor personally is my favorite of the original 4 Fire Skylanders. However, I'll still keep a sharp eye out for Lava Lance Eruptor. And do I hope to get his Eons Elite? Hell yeah I do! Like all the other elements, Giants only introduced 2 new Fire Skylanders, Hothead and Hot Dog. If you stuck with my channel for quite some time now, the former you know I enjoy very much, but the latter, he was the last Giants core I needed. So what's my opinion on Hot Dog? Well, let's start off him and we'll see.
What the dog doing?
Hot Dog's name is really clever, and I wish I had his Molten variant as it just reminds me of Popcorn. When it comes to his movesets, not much I can terribly say. His primary attack is okay, but it's very unoriginal as it's just fireballs, and Eruptor already did that move so much better as they have more utility in comparison. Like Flameslinger, I also got this guy at Farah, but I never bothered to reset him, so the Hot Dog that I have is automatically set to the Pyro Pooch upgrade path, which focuses on his firewall attacks. And while the way the attack functions certainly helps him stand out compared to other Fire Skylanders, it's only handy in certain situations like pulling a group of enemies back, and the damage output is very underwhelming. His tertiary attack is actually decently powerful and pretty fun to use as well. His Soul Gem further expands this by having him leave a exploding poop bag after the attack is used. I actually find that prospect very disgusting, and it makes me less inclined to use the tertiary attack otherwise. Hot Dog is alright, but I feel that the developers spent a lot more time with the design of his character rather than making an effective moveset. To hand it to Hot Dog, I do think that his moveset flows a lot better compared to Sunburn, but it's also a hell of a lot less unique. And sure, his design is cute, but I can't really connect with it as I'm not a dog person in the slightest. Don't get me wrong, I still had fun with Hot Dog, even if most of that enjoyment came from giving him a plunger hat.
I'm singing in the oil. I'm singing in the oil. After all that.
Well, I did say my Skylanders collection began with a Fire Skylander. When I first purchased him in that faithful TK Maxx trip, all the way up to now, my love for Hothead has never wavered. Hothead is not just my favourite giant Skylander, but also my favourite Fire Skylander of all time. I already talked about this guy in my ranking Skylanders Giants video, so I'll do my best to not be a broken record. His primary attack is amazing to handle. You can easily clear out hordes of smaller enemies, and it deals lots of damage too. However, it's way more effective when it's used in conjunction with his secondary attack, where it can shoot some oil blobs. Then, if you set that unlucky enemy on fire, enemies covered in that oil will deal extra damage, and it saves you a lot of time in the battle. No other Skylander uses oil attacks, so it makes Hothead stand out. I also have Hothead in his Oil Baron path, which increases the power of his tertiary attack tenfold. Wait, no, 1,000-fold. Not only does his Firestorm deal lots of chip damage, but if you press the secondary attack button, he can do a ring of oil, which is amazing for crowd control, which is especially helpful for Skylander giants like Hothead, who is very slow and therefore can't get out of these situations as easily. I also recently tried out another one of his moves, where if you hold down the tertiary attack button, he can summon a giant meteor. It doesn't take too long to charge up, and it deals 100 damage on enemy contact. However, it does leave you vulnerable as you can't use your oil ring simultaneously, so you have to pick the right moments to either use your oil ring or your meteor strike. Hothead's Soul Gem allows him to turn into a motorcycle. It looks a bit goofy at first, but it improves Hothead's overall mobility. Natlo, you are a genius. I just love everything about Hothead. His design with his exhaust protruding from his shoulders. I just love how destructive and fun his attacks are. Hothead means a lot to me, and I couldn't have picked a better figure to start my Skylanders collecting journey. Swap Force introduced us to 4 new Fire Skylanders: Blast Zone, Firecracken, Smolder Dash, and Frino. And even after getting back into Skylanders, the amount of new Swap Force Fire Skylanders I've had remained. The only ones which I don't have yet are regular Firecracken and Lightcore Smolder Dash. However, after replaying these Skylanders, I realize now that Swap Force was a pretty weak year for the fire element.
Shut up.
Blast Zone is an excellent starter pack Skylander. While I do generally think his design is a bit too similar to Igniter, just executed to a more generic standard, Dark variants less so, he still looks pretty cool, and Blast Zone himself is very fun. His primary attack is great at getting that first input of damage from throwing bombs from afar, but if you wanted to get up close and personal with enemies without getting hit, his secondary attack even before upgrades work wonders. His rocket dash ability can knock an enemy far back so that you can even deal with one enemy that may be right in front of you, or you can engage him from a safe distance with your bombs. His tertiary attack allows you to breathe a wall of fire, which is okay for chip damage I suppose, but if you pick the right path for Blast Zone's top half, only then does it become devastating in combat. Speaking of bombs, if you hold down his primary attack button, then he can throw a sticky bomb which clings onto enemies. They are especially helpful if you're dealing with a much tougher enemy. Much like Flameslinger and Eruptor, I have Blast Zone in all of his upgrade paths. For my regular Blast Zone's top half, I have his ignition path, and his bottom half contains his fuel injected path, while my Dark Blast Zone contains the reaction satisfaction path on his top half, while his bottom half contains the temperatures rising path. Both paths help his moveset flow together a lot better. His ignition path allows his bombs to catch fire and deal extra damage. This path is all well and good, but it's not great if enemies are homing in on you, and the bombs do plenty enough damage even without the firewall's help. Personally, I'm more of a fan of this reaction satisfaction path. If you draw a circle with this firewall, it will cause an explosion, and it will deal knockback damage. You could then use this to your advantage to chain your other attacks onto an enemy. As for his bottom half, the fuel injected path allows you to shoot a powerful heat wave after using your secondary ability. If timed correctly, it can deal extra damage to an enemy who may not be initially caught in the rocket dash. The other path is the temperature's rising path, which isn't great. After doing your rocket dash, you create a defensive fire aura, but I don't like it. It deals 12 damage to enemies, which is too little, and you're still vulnerable to them anyway. So if you want to have a fun and fast-paced blast zone who deals tons of knockback damage, then overall, for his top half, pick the reaction satisfaction path, while for his bottom half, pick the fuel injected path. Unlike most people, Blast Zone and Washbuckler weren't my first two swappers. That honor goes to Trap Shadow. And while I really like both starter pack swappers, Blast Zone has always been my favorite of the two, as I just think his design is a little bit more cooler, and I think his gameplay is much more fast-paced in comparison.
I sense the Dragon Warrior is among us.
First off, I just want to mention that I completely forgot about Jade Firecracken for the longest time, and now that I think about it, I think he's actually my favorite variant in the entirety of Swap Force. Because, my goodness, it just looks so amazing. The translucent green, the stylish gold, I just absolutely love it. I remember getting him as part of a haul during one of my birthdays in Denmark, and I got him along with Gorilla Driller, Freeze Blade, Legendary Lightcore Grim Creeper, and a free pack containing Series 3 Gilgund and Trigger Happy, and Star Strike. And I think the Jade variant looks miles superior in comparison to his original design, which isn't bad, I just prefer the much focused color scheme of green and gold. However, his design is unfortunately the only nice thing I can say about Firecracken, because the moment when moveset comes into play, everything falls apart. His primary attack is extremely underwhelming to handle, and he has a charge-up attack which looks really nice, but because you're so close to enemies, it leaves you extremely vulnerable. His secondary attack is pretty good, as you can knock enemies away from the stage, but since I have it under the booming bouncer path, his charge-up attack has increased damage. He can do a tail swipe, and then you have to wait, like, 4 hours for him to jump into the air to do a huge fireworks explosion. I guess it's good for crowd control if you wait the right moment, but unless you have a close eye, it's really hard to tell when the charge up move is ready, and you can't control when he jumps up into the air. His tertiary attack just looks weird, and I tried improving it in his top half's Magnificent Parade upgrade path, but the sparks that shoot out of a dragon does barely any damage, and it makes me less inclined to use his tertiary ability, unless I want to give myself a laugh of how completely random it is. I don't really consider Firecracken to be bad, I just find him completely underwhelming, and his movesets does not flow together well at all. But there's also the possibility that I could have just picked the wrong paths with this guy. At the time of recording, I may not necessarily enjoy playing Firecracken in game, and how for some reason Firecracken's voice reminds me of Patty and Selma Bouvier from The Simpsons. I will be honest, I will never tire at looking at Jade Firecracken's figure and marveling at how amazing it looks.
Rhinox, maximize!
Oh dear god, it's even worse. Phino is one of these Skylanders that I do not remember how I acquired. Actually, now that I think about it, I keep forgetting that Phino exists in general. His punches feel slow and not all that unique compared to other Skylanders, and I get that you're meant to charge up his primary attack for the use of his secondary attack, but I don't really see much worth in it. Like, sure, the damage is increased, and his punching gloves glow a certain color whenever you're in a particular power level, which I have to say is very visually nice to look at. Because Phino's punching animations are so sluggishly slow that he's still vulnerable against an enemy, and his secondary attack is not even great of an attack, as it can only stun enemies briefly before they start attacking you again. Now, I understand that Phino's main appeal is the whole high-risk, high-reward gameplay style, but to me, the reward is extremely underwhelming. It feels like a constant stop-start, and I just really hate that in a Skylander. Even worse, a part of Lobstar's moveset takes Phino's entire concept and make it extremely obsolete. If Lobstar fully charges up, he jumps into the sky and does a massive slam onto the ground, which deals a lot of damage to a surrounding area of enemies. And better yet, while he spoils, not only does his attack power increase, but also his speed. Unleashing that havoc onto swarms of enemies with increased power and speed makes me incredibly rewarded for charging up my attacks at the cost of being vulnerable to enemies. It just makes me question why I should even bother playing as Rhino when I can play as that much better Skylander from a game later. I may have made a mistake in purchasing his Rhino's Hot Shop upgrade path because his tertiary attack is his best attack by a landslide. It's very fun riding a motorcycle while traversing the stage, but also if you crash it onto an enemy, it deals some much needed destruction and knockback damage. On another note, what the hell is this post meant to be? It's really not a hard ask. A good Skylander's post should communicate to you what their personality is like, or at least draw attention to your curiosity on what their moveset would be like. Rhino's face posture not only just looks incredibly weird, but his pose is also vague, odd, and there's no particular element that leads me to be drawn into his design. Thank goodness his Series 2 figure has a much more awesome pose. Rhino is not a weak Skylander, but he's just so dull to play as. It's no wonder I keep forgetting this guy exists. Oh my days, you two are really letting down the fire element for me. Smolder Dash, you better turn things around. Okay, I'll shut up now. Oh, I am absolutely speechless. This is a Skylander which my sister owned for the longest time, so I recently upgraded her under the Sun Forged path, and man, is she incredibly fun to play as. Smolder Dash has two different playstyles, both surprisingly well balanced as they're able to deal with enemies in certain unique ways. Her normal form just has a regular whip, which moves a lot slower but deals quite a good amount of damage. Her secondary attack allows her to shoot a fireball, which in a normal form deals knockback damage. It's initially a bit hard to handle them as they travel just as slowly as Eruptor's tertiary attack, but when you get it right, the knockback damage it produces allows you to single out on a particular enemy. Her tertiary attack is really when things get interesting, as it shakes up Smolder Dash's gameplay completely. Her tertiary attack initiates Smolder Dash's Eclipse mode. She now wields two whips, which does the same amount of damage but does it in twice the speed. And during Eclipse mode, you can press the tertiary attack button to make her do a very powerful dash. Her Eclipse form also changes the properties of her solar orbs. Instead of doing knockback damage, it now sucks in enemies from a particular radius, effectively bunching them up so that you can take out more than one enemy in quick succession. However, be warned, as her Eclipse mode doesn't last for too long. Smolder Dash's flames in her hair will be put out, and you have to wait quite a bit until her hair sets alight again, indicating that Eclipse mode is ready to be utilized once more. So I heavily recommend using her Eclipse form when there are loads of enemies overwhelming you. Last and certainly not least, if you hold down the primary attack button, she jumps into the air and does a massive sun attack slam onto the ground. And depending on what mode you're in, you can either knock back enemies or suck them closer to you so that you can deal with them more effectively. I never ever played as Smolder Dash when I was a lot younger, so going into this Skylander, I did not know what to expect. So I was incredibly blown away with how surprisingly complex her moveset is. I'll be honest, I'll happily place Smolder Dash above Eruptor, because I've never had as much fun with a fire Skylander like Smolder Dash for the longest time. But before we go on to Skylander's trap team, let's take a brief detour and take a look at some of the reposters I currently own and the WoW pals that tried to improve and expand upon the current Skylander's moveset. Featuring our special guest tonight, Dur Does Stuff.
Everybody, whether that be sooner or later, will reach a peak in their life. I'm in a Bionic Hero video. I know, hold your applause. No, like, seriously, stop. I said stop clap. See, it's not every day you get to appear on the Bionic Hero YouTube channel. This is the pinnacle of my YouTube career, so I've got to make it last. I'm gonna have the most dignified, exquisite review of these plastic figurines to show that I am capable of making mature and intellectual content.
Starting with one of my favorite Series 2 WoW pals is Series 2 Eruptor. The reason being is because it takes a move which I absolutely despise and improves it tenfold with a surprisingly simple yet very effective short-range flamethrower. With this change and simple change alone, it makes his tertiary attack a lot more viable in combat in my personal opinion. Hence why I won't be hesitant to give this wow pow a 5 out of 5.
The last thing I needed to do today was talk about him. That's fine, totally fine. I can get through this video without complaining too much. Why is this one's wow pow called Lava Barf? I swear, if the Series 3 is Lava Barf 2, I'm gonna start a riot. Okay, I'm getting cynical again. This move is by far the best thing in Eruptor's kit. It is, at its core, a genuinely very good move. It does a lot of damage at burst and can be held a good while at an area. Very good wow pow, 4 out of 5. Bad name. The figure looks cool though.
What really irks me heavily is that just when a Series 2 finally improves his tertiary attack, they somehow make it even worse for a Series 3. The method of initiating that attack is the same, just hold down the tertiary attack button. But A, you end up staying stationary, which leaves you vulnerable to enemy attack, and B, when you do initiate the attack, the fireballs fly everywhere and only hit enemies like 5% of the time, and even when it does, the payoff is ridiculously small. I'm only giving it a 2 out of 5 though, because the only real redeeming quality to this wow pow is that I actually do really like the name. Lava Barf 2, Barf Harder.
Okay, Bionic Hero, sorry for interrupting, but can you please repeat the name of that attack if you don't mind?
Lava Barf 2, Barf Harder? Like, I'm 100% convinced that it's a reference to Die Hard's 2, Die Harder. Oh, my apologies for interrupting you at first time, that was quite rude of me.
Lava Barf Eruptor's wow pow is very solid. What it lacks in practicalness and general utility compared to the Series 3, it makes up for in concept and coolness factor. It provides a use for third attacks lava balls that end up just rolling around the place and hitting nothing. But as a move you would want in a kit like this, it's way worse than Lava Barf 1. There, I did it. 3 out of 5. This is why I hate Eruptor!
Moving on steadily, we have Series 2 Flameslinger's wow pow. His Series 2 wow pow is a small change to his moveset, but then again, that can be attributed to most wow powers in Giants. If you press his primary attack while doing his secondary dash attack, he runs even faster and leaves a bigger trail of fire. I don't use it all the time as his flame dash is already fast and powerful as is, but the extra speed and the extra damage output is nice regardless. 3 out of 5.
What a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I get to talk about Flameslinger. And oh my god, this wow pow is amazing. If you're running a Flameslinger that isn't Series 2, you're wasting your time. The already unbelievably fast Flameslinger gets even faster. Of all Skylanders that needed a speed boost, it was not him. But who cares, he got it anyway. Flameslinger essentially becomes impossible to hit. Impossible, unless you're doing something really wrong. It is a little silly to control at times, but that's probably just a skill issue. 5 out of 5, very fast.
And with these 3 wow pows reviewed, let's look at the scores. Coming in dead last is Series 3 Eruptor with a total score of 5 out of 10, then comes Series 2 Flameslinger with an 8 out of 10, and finally Series 2 Eruptor with a 9 out of 10. I find it quite a silly coincidence that Eruptor both takes the top and last spot, with Flameslinger sandwiched in the middle. However, this list will be updated in the next Elemental Retrospective, so who knows whether Series 2 Eruptor will retain the first place spot. But with that, let's get back on schedule with Trap Team. With half of the swap for Skylanders being absolute rubbish, Trap Team I feel definitely restored Fire to its former glory. Only one is okay at best, while the other 2 are extremely powerful, but also extremely fun. And I didn't even have any of the new Fire Skylanders from Trap Team until I got back into Skylanders in 2021. Until that point, I only had Excellent Eruptor, but look at him. He's just so damn cute. Anyway, without further ado, let's look at the Skylanders from my favorite game in the franchise.
Hellfire! Dark fire!
Everyone loves Wildfire, and yeah, for once I do agree. Costing a whopping £12 at the time, I bought Wildfire on a whim during a casual trip to CEX. And when I say Wildfire, I mean specifically Dark Wildfire. Though iconic, I've never been a huge fan of Wildfire's original design with him just being gold, so I'm glad that I acquired his dark variant first. The silver mixing in beautifully to create a gradient with a black, and his gigantic Traptanium shield contemplating really well with his overall design. Wildfire is also just pretty good in general. His shield bash is tons of fun to use, and it does over 100 damage per hit. This is absolutely crazy. If you set him down the shield slasher path, he also gets some fluently animated and OP combos. And if you hold down the primary attack button and press it again, you can turn into a lion and deal over 200 damage. Are you serious? However, don't you think that he's a one-trick pony, as Wildfire's other 2 attacks are also seriously busted. His fire chains can not only briefly stun enemies but also pull them closer, and his fire breath, sure a little bit uninspired in concept, but it also deals quite a good amount of damage. Wildfire is one of those Skylanders who are disgustingly overpowered, yet very enjoyable. Wildfire is a firm fan favorite, and there's no doubt about that.
Gentlemen, the clock's ticking. We need to come up with a new Trapmaster's design for the fire element, or others will all be fired. Oh, I know what we can make. A sentient smoke cloud. Bethany and her team already had that idea, you nitwits. All that I ask of you is to create an original design for Fire Trapmaster. Jimmy, this is not the time for fan art! Oh, but I was working so hard on my custom He-Man character. You see, his name is Kaboom. He has a big cannon. Perfect, we'll use that design.
Kaboom was a Trapmaster that has always interested me, mainly because of his Traptanium weapon, which is the only Traptanium weapon to be a firearm. However, I never acquired him until 2 years ago, where, big shocker, I went to another CEX store and I got him along the Nightmare Express Adventure Pack, only containing the Adventure Pack figurine, by the way. Now, I have been a bit of a silly sausage. I completely forgot to fully upgrade my Kaboom before making this video, so I have played an entire level with him to make sure I get enough money to buy his last 2 upgrades I needed. Coincidentally, it was actually Chef Zeppelin, which is where I played Kaboom for the first time back in my old Skylanders review series Code First Impressions. Ah, how history repeats itself. And so, after my 2 or 3 years of owning Kaboom, do I think he's still good? Honestly, I think I do. Kaboom's primary attack is especially destructive under the cannonball runner path. Not only can he shoot 3 cannonballs at once, but also they bounce over walls and they even bounce between enemies. I really enjoy Skylanders whose projectiles bounce around walls and cause massive destruction in a larger area, like Trigger Happy and to a much lesser degree Astro Blast. Kaboom's secondary attack does a cannon jump, which does a large explosion, but it doesn't deal any knockback damage, which does leave you vulnerable. I prefer using that attack as a means to get away from enemy attack, as it still damages them regardless. His tertiary attack is best to do from a safe distance, and I prefer shooting multiple cannonballs at once, as opposed to just shooting 1 cannonball at a time. The Traptanium missiles deals about 110 damage each, which is great if you're dealing with a much tougher enemy. Back in Code First Impressions when I reset my Kaboom, I gave him a 4 out of 5, and with upgrades, yeah, I think I'll give him the same score. Kaboom is a fun Skylander to play as, but I do want to try his other upgrade path to see whether his secondary attack improves. That way, I'm not just relying on his primary attack to do all the dirty work. Oh yeah, by the way, I still think Kaboom has the worst catchphrase in Skylanders history.
Boom time!
More like boo time. Ha ha ha.
Torch is a pretty good Skylander, but she's not one of my personal favorites. Once more, this is another Skylander which I bought at Father, and I got her along with the Scorpion Striker Battle Pack. Just the figure, that is. Like Hot Dog, I didn't bother resetting her, so she was automatically in the Forged in Flames path. And it's cool that she has a flamethrower in the first place, but I for one thought it was gonna be a more ranged attack, but just like an actual flamethrower, it is extremely destructive, and if you hold down the primary attack button, the flames turn blue, which makes it perfect for dealing with more tougher enemies like this Shrednot right here. Her secondary attack allows her to throw a horseshoe at enemies, which sticks to them, and despite it dealing 100 damage, it doesn't burn them over time, and so you're better off just using the flamethrower. Her tertiary attack allows her to do a flaming hair whip, but I only recommend it if smaller enemies are rapidly advancing towards you. That way you can knock them back and then deal extra damage with your primary attack flamethrower. While I do enjoy her primary attack, there are much better Skylander attacks out there that just simply have more range and power, and personally I think her design could have done without the flaming hair. Her blowtorch is enough justification for her to be in the fire element, so I think the fire hair is extremely unnecessary. Also, her personality is a bit annoying, so that makes me less invested in this Skylander overall. Torch is a good pick, but I personally believe that there are much better fire Skylanders out there. If a blowtorch simply had more range, I'd enjoy this Skylander a lot more. Well, that's Trap Team done, but I feel like I'm missing something. Oh wait, I don't have Trailblazer. Huh, is Dur still around?
Donkey, you're a
Stallion, baby!
Every media franchise has at least one character that nobody really knows if they like or dislike. You can probably assume how I'm gonna bridge this to Trailblazer. Trailblazer might be my favorite Trap Team core. Now, as odd as that opinion sounds, I can assure you that Trailblazer is worth your time. If any of you know me, which you probably don't, Eruptor is my least favorite Skylander of all time. The reason I say this is that it makes it a lot weirder that I like Trailblazer. I've loved him since I got him from eBay that one day. Yeah, we go back pretty far. Trailblazer is essentially Eruptor if he was, like, actually good. To start, as a successful lobber in any video game, you need two things. 1. Efficient damage output that can be performed at a safe distance and over walls when necessary. 2. A means of maintaining that distance, whether that be a knockback or mobility move. Trailblazer successfully does all of this. His second attack is a great get-off-me tool, and albeit the worst in his main kit, it does what it needs to effectively. The main drawback is its lack of sheer power if you absolutely need to use it as a close-range damage tool. It also can be pretty tricky to aim with if you're not proficient with Trailblazer, which I'm willing to bet nobody watching this is. Usually the projectiles have trouble hitting the target in crucial moments. While in general it's a good control tool, it pales in comparison to how amazing his third attack does this. Not only does he get a ton of movement from using this to essentially any position he wants to zone from, you do solid damage to anything around you or in your wake. This move could have a label that says, for ages 3 and up, that's just how safe it is. This works wonders when in synergy with its first attack, which I can only describe as if Eruptor's first attack was stronger, faster, impossible to miss, and had almost no startup lag. It's one of the most satisfying primary attacks to use, simply because of how much fire just rains down on anything between your unicorn horn and the end of a level. And while I could glaze Trailblazer's moveset for at least another year and a half, I've got to actually talk about other aspects of the character. When it comes to design, Trailblazer does more than fall short. It falls just hero. And believe me, that's pretty short. Now, as the world's 7th biggest Trailblazer stan circa 2015, I'll be the first to admit his design looks like a bad Lady Gaga costume with Dragon Ball Fusion dance with that hoist from Toy Story, dumped in red paint and resold as a Funko Pop. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't look bad per se, but it looks like something ChatGPT would come up with. The utter lack of inspiration carries over to his moveset too. If you remove the cool effects, his second and third attack are just something a normal pony could do. And as much as I hate it, his primary is just Eruptors. I wouldn't be surprised if Trailblazer was one of, if not the last Skylanders designed for Trap Team. Anyway, I'm pretty sure everyone's done with me talking about Trailblazer. The rest won't be this long, I promise. So let's move to someone more interesting.
Note to myself, the next time I see Trailblazer in CEX, just think of how much Dur praised him and purchase him immediately. As of recording this video, for Imaginators and Superchargers, I only have one Fire Skylander from each of those games. For Superchargers' case, it's a bit of an odd one, because you guys may be thinking, hey, what about Spitfire? Didn't he appear in the starter pack? And yes, in the Xbox and PlayStation versions. When I pre-ordered Superchargers, I pre-ordered the Wii U version, as the Wii U was the only console I had at the time. And in place of Spitfire and his signature vehicle, the Hot Streak, I instead acquired turbocharged Donkey Kong and his matching vehicle, the Barrel Blaster, on day one. Now, I'm aware that in the Wii U, with there's no Skylanders of a portal, with a simple push of a button you can access into the Spitfire, and I did play with them a handful of times, but instant versions of Skylanders tend to be a lot more weaker than the regular versions, and as someone who has never physically owned a Spitfire, I'm very curious on what his abilities are actually like. So I decided not to include the instant version for this video. Plus, I think it's much more preferable to get someone who actually owns Spitfire to explain accurately what his moveset is like. So, in the meantime, what do I think of Hammer Slam Bowser?
Peach!
Hammer Slam Bowser was another Skylander I was just allowed to take from my cousin's stash, but you may be surprised that I initially got Bowser for his amiibo functionality. But then I watched Crypt Crusher's video about Bowser, and then I thought, hey, you know what? He seems quite interesting as a Skylander. So, for this video, I decided to give him a proper first go. Per recommendation from Crypt Crusher's basically video, I put Bowser under the Molten Monstrosity path. Now, all things considered, juggling 3 red Koopas with your hammer and making sure you keep special attention on them so that they don't lose power is extremely fun. It's easily my favorite part of Hammer Slam Bowser's moveset. His hammer is okay and does pretty good damage, but it's not as fun to use in comparison to juggling the red Koopa shells with the same attack. Despite the Molten Monstrosity path focusing on his alternate form, that being the Magma Bowser form, personally, I'm not really a huge fan of it. The damage from his infinite fire breath was pretty good damage. I personally find it to be a bit lacking in the range department, and when he swipes his claws and hits an enemy, his frame rate drops, something which I have a huge gripe with, and it puts me off using his Molten Bowser form. Hammer Slam Bowser is an okay Skylander, but I find him to be a bit unbalanced. One form is pretty fun to use, while the other is completely underwhelming to control. Compared to turbocharged Donkey Kong, Hammer Slam Bowser is a bit of a substandard Skylander, but I will say this, I do not regret trying him out.
Spitfire have the solution.
Spitfire is very good. I don't have much to say about him besides the fact that he's very solid in just about everything he does. Strong? You got it. Fast? That's an understatement. Easiest vehicle in the game? Check. Fire Dragon? That too. There's really not much to say about Spitfire as a concept because there's nothing that hasn't been said already. I've never heard a person claim to dislike Spitfire, and the amount of times I've seen him top the best Superchargers list is more often than not. Genuinely let me know if you got an issue with Spitfire, because I might want an interview. Let's get into his moveset, shall we? His primary attack is your run-of-the-mill punch combo, but he spins around and stuff, so it makes it feel more satisfying to use. No disrespect to the Skylanders community, but the most popular characters tend to be the ones you can just run in and spam the attack button with, and that's okay. He's also got that secondary attack that gives him some of the best mobility for a Skylander in the whole series. You know that one fight scene from that one Flash movie? That's what playing as Spitfire feels like, and obviously his third attack is awesome. It's a fire tornado, it's cool by association. It's honestly not the greatest offensively, but it's awesome, so who cares? And since we're talking awesome, his design. Spitfire feels incredibly uninspired, but you know how he makes up for it? He looks cool. That's all you really need in the end. Fire Dragon Tornado thingy?
Approved!
What's that I hear? Talk about the variant? Okay, nobody said that, but I'm addressing it anyway. He looks so cool. Why they made his fire black? I'll never know. They tend to not do that. But whoever gave that the green light needs a raise. Nerf Spitfire.
My Skylanders Imaginators Sensei collection is not one of the most grand out there. When it came to Imaginators, the main appeal for me was always creating my own Skylander with a creation crystal, and I mainly wanted to get the Senseis just to access the Sensei realms corresponding to a particular element. Their generally high prices in the aftermarket definitely does not help them either. For example, Pinata is my first Magic Sensei and my first Smasher Sensei, and I only got him at Christmas last year. In short, I just generally procrastinate when it comes to collecting senseis. There are only 2 elements where I have more than one sensei. The undead element with the based pit boss and the Chad Wolfgang, and the dark element with Hoodsickle and Hoodsickle. So with the generally dry collection of senseis that I have, Firework, more so specifically hard-built Firework, stands out from the crowd. Here's my first and currently only fire sensei I have, and it just so happens to be the Easter version of Firework. I really enjoy his blue and purple color scheme, as well as his big metallic pink bazooka, which just looks amazing. But how is hard-boiled Firework like in-game?
Explosion. Sound.
Firework is a pretty fun and powerful sensei, and he has a lot of interesting gimmicks thrown into his moveset. Keeps his gameplay continuously fluid. But do I think he's the best sensei, let alone best fire Skylander? Well, when his primary attack is upgraded, I do quite like the fact that it leaves firecrackers onto enemies, which deals continuous chip damage. His secondary attack also gives him an enjoyable dash attack. Not exactly something new, but okay. What it is that if you hold the same attack down, you can fly up in the air and rain terror down your enemies. You know what? I take that back. His secondary attack is really enjoyable. His tertiary attack is a pretty neat flamethrower, and I like how it gets more powerful the more you hold down the attack button, until you hold it for so long enough that it just starts spinning instead. While it's good for dealing damage to smaller enemies and knocking them back, what I can't appreciate is how you lose range of this move completely, and you sort of have to force yourself to go close to enemies in order to do damage. His Sky Chi... it's a bit boring. All you do is just shoot like 4 missiles, and I don't find that appealing in the slightest. If you jump in the air and press the tertiary attack button, you can shoot a gigantic missile, which has pretty good area coverage. But why do that when with Zook, I could just... No way! A long time ago, I called Firework the most overrated Skylander. I do slightly agree with myself. Whether that opinion still holds true, it depends if I find another Skylander to be just as overrated as Firework, and there's still 7 elements to go. I still think that his personality is too derivative of Trigger Happy's, just throwing some pyromaniac tendencies, and you get Firework. Firework can be a bit hit or miss for me, but I know that when I pop him on the portal, I'm bound to have a good time regardless, and at the end of the day, that's simply all you need.
I've heard people whine and whine again about the element swap of Taekwon Crow, but people don't understand. That's the least important part of him. See, if you're an intellectual like me, you'd understand Taekwon Crow's best feature is his voice acting.
I have mastered the art of victory! And I'm pretty good at finger painting too!
But I will say, his gameplay isn't bad either. I find the ninja stars really fun to use. The sound effects are exquisite. He also has a gimmick I'm surprised hasn't been utilized more. You can combine his fire kicks and then shoot the stars through them. While this is entirely stolen from Blast Zone, it doesn't mean it isn't cool. And he can summon buzzer beaks. If that isn't the greatest thing ever, I don't know what is. The only thing I find really unfortunate is the lack of his sword. I thought his sword abilities were really fun in Trap Team. You hate to see it go, but it's not the make or break of the character for me. His awesome design is still there, if not improved upon with even funnier voice lines and a more established character. That's where most of Taekwon Crow's charm came from for me. I don't actually have Taekwon Crow, I only have the mystical version, which I think is one of the best variants out there. If I recall, I think I got him at GameStop back in 2016 to 17 with some leftover Christmas money. Since then, I've probably replayed the figure from level 1 at least 3 times now. That's honestly the only bad part about him, is that I have to play him in Imaginators. If I'm being real, there probably isn't much that can make me dislike Taekwon Crow. Okay, I take it back, please turn that off.
Now, my final verdict for the fire element. I do really enjoy this element, honestly. Most of my favorite Skylanders of a fire element tend to be the most destructive ones. Skylanders who are absolutely effective when it comes to crowd control. Fire in of itself is incredibly dangerous. It can spread with relative ease, and it burns anything it touches. Fire Skylanders who can replicate that sort of effect, while feeling incredibly fresh, unique, and fun to play as, unleashing the deadly effect of fire onto Chaos's goons and minions, are exactly why these sort of Skylanders are my favorite when it comes to the fire element. However, much like fire in real life, it can be put out with water, or with simply a blanket over it. A lot of the Skylanders in the fire element has some specific flaws that are holding them back from truly being my absolute favorites. This can range from a moveset for being either inconsistent in quality, or even for one simple factor that bogs down their gameplay a little. Eruptor, for example, is, at the time of recording, my third favorite Fire Skylander, but back then and even still now, I absolutely disliked his tertiary attack. I'm also not sold on his bomb path, and I really dislike his Series 3 WoW power. When I started this YouTube channel, Eruptor was my second favorite Fire Skylander, but even then, because of his tertiary attack, he never made it on my top 20 list. Hothead was the only Fire Skylander who even made it onto that list, and at number 5 no less. And I don't see that spot ever changing personally. But do not get me wrong in the slightest. I still really love the fire element. I don't think it's even my least favorite element, and we still have 7 elements to go. And I know that in my spare time, if I play Skylanders and switch to a Fire Skylander, I enjoy that time regardless. Unfortunately, this video is coming to a close. First things first, I want to say a massive thank you to my friend Dur Does Stuff for helping me fill in gaps in my Fire Skylanders collection.
And I'd like to say thanks for having me. I'm probably gonna go stare at the wall for a couple minutes to get over the idea of Lava Barf 2, so I'll hit you up another time. Bye.
The latest episode of the Skylanders Nuzlocke has recently just released, so make sure to check it out. Additionally, tell me in the comments what are your favourite Fire Skylanders and why. I'm open to any opinions. Like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.